Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with our new friend Guld. We're here to break down his indie game that last Chronomancer and everything in between. And holy crap, I love this game, man. This game was so much fun to play. We have the gameplay footage right next to us. This is me playing this game, and I had a blast. Guld, welcome to the stream. How are you?
Hey, thanks for the hyped intro there, man. Cody, I appreciate it. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive too deep into the interview and the questions and everything, let's begin with you. Give us an introduction to who you are and how you got into creating indie games.
Fair enough. My name is Guld. I mean, that's my name. And I got into creating this through actually one of my brothers. He kind of introduced me to one of the newer RPG Maker, I guess, game engines. And when I saw it, I thought, man, I tried getting a Dungeons and Dragons thing set up for a bunch of friends and family that ended up going nowhere. But when I did that, I had created this whole world and characters and story. And I thought, hey, what? I bet you I could replicate that on a game engine. Why not? What I didn't realize is how long it would take to do that properly. And so here I am now. I guess 4 years? Well, 3. No, I think 4 years. Maybe 4 years. Oh no, I guess it's October. Yeah, I think it's been at least 4 years that I've been working on this one now. It's my first, I guess, game that I've created. So it's been a lot of a learning curve. I think the first year or so was just learning how to use the engine. But at this point now, it's just been my long journey, which hopefully I'll have finished in at least another year. I'm hoping by the end of 2023.
And this, we were talking, I want to say last time I streamed it, you have a decent amount of chapters set to release with this, right?
Yeah, in total, there was initially just a really quick demo, which was maybe an hour long worth of gameplay that I had out there. And then I expanded that to the Chapter 1 demo, which is, like you said, around 4.5 hours. And then that was kind of a really... I think that was a good length in case somebody wanted to just sample it or if they actually wanted to kind of dig their teeth in. But eventually, I am currently working on the beginning of Chapter 7, and Chapter 8 should be it. That should be the final chapter. So everything's on pace. It's just a matter of I think all my major learning curve hurdles have been have been done. The only thing now is just putting in the time, putting in the work, and doing it properly, and then obviously testing it out until I'm exhausted. So it's chapter 8 chapters should be coming, and rough estimate would be, I don't know, 40 plus hours, I imagine.
Wow. So how long are these chapters looking to be? I know Chapter 1 was roughly about 4 hours.
Yeah, I'd say about 4 for the first one. Chapter 2 I don't think would be quite as long. They would vary in length. So I think Chapter 1 would be probably the longest in terms of overall I guess gameplay. But again, I'm kind of using it's really hard to guess gameplay time, especially on an RPG, because you don't know how the player is going to choose to play your game. Some people really love world exploring and grinding. Some players just love talking to every single NPC and looking around every nook and cranny for a hidden potion. Others just want to they'll literally run from any encounter just so they can go right to the boss and possibly wipe and start all over. You don't know. It's one of those it's one of, I guess, the cool things about the medium is that you're basically creating a storytelling opportunity, but it's very much a choose your own pace adventure. So unlike normal media, like a movie or a TV show, or even a comic where there's kind of just a very linear path of how you go from point A to point B, there's all these other paths that the player can take, and none of them are wrong. But how a player chooses to play your game, I mean, if they're playing poorly as far as the gameplay or the combat, I mean, that's one thing. But I'm like, there's no wrong pacing, I guess I should put.
We have William saying RPG players are pretty varied like that. Yeah, for me, I am a big stiffler. I love exploring every nook and cranny. I'm one of those players, if I go to beat the game and it's like, oh, you have 99.1 completion, and I'm like, where is that other 9%? I need it.
Yeah, and that is definitely a type of a player type that you should consider and kind of cater to be honest, because I mean that's a genuine, legit, type of player that's going to be playing your game, and there's no reason to discourage against them, or you should kind of embrace that. I mean, it's maybe not even, honestly, depending on my mood, sometimes I am that way. Sometimes I'm the look, I don't have time for this, I just want to skip and go right to the parts I find exciting. Like I'll change depending on the time of day, to be honest. But yeah, it's and I gotta say, we should probably get this out of the way. I gotta give you some my condolences. I saw you do the one stream, and then I think you said that you hadn't saved that time, and then I saw you do the second stream.
Yeah.
And I felt bad, but on the other hand, I was like, come on, man, you gotta save. I felt like
so reliant on I'm so reliant on auto saving.
Yeah, and that actually might be a generational thing, to be honest. I mean, I don't know how much. I don't think you're that much younger than me, but let's say you're
I'm like really 33. Young. What do you mean?
You're a young buck. No, it's fine. That is, I think, one of the things where back in the day there literally was no such thing as autosave. Like it didn't exist.
You had the code. You had to write them down.
Either that, or you saved and you hoped that the game didn't delete it. And Dragon Warrior 3, I remember that one. But anyway,
dude, mine was Final Fantasy. What was it? It's 3. I think it's 3 on the SNES, right? Or 6?
That was 6. 6 in Japan.
The battery died, and so I was like, what? It was like right after World of Ruin, and so I was pretty far, and I was grinding. What was it? The Espers, and maxing them out. And I remember I went to go pop it in the next day, and it's like starting me over. I'm like, what happened? And then I found out very quick that there's batteries in those SNES cartridges, and they die.
I didn't know that. Did they get recharged every time you plug it in?
No, you have to. You replace the battery. It's like really? Game Boy. So like Pokemon games have them too. They the save file saves to the battery, and once the battery dies, it like deletes the file.
Gotcha.
It's something like that.
No, that sounds right. I think the worst experiences I had with that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Dragon Warrior. It was either 3 or 2. I want to say 3. It had a known bug where it would. The worst part is it knew. So when you would boot it up, it would be like. It would literally tell you, like, sadly, your game progress has been deleted. You're like, what?
That's like the worst part. It's like, don't rub it in.
40 out. Yeah, like, it's like I knew what I did, and I'm proud of it. Yeah, it was painful to say the least. But yeah, I noticed with yours, and I noticed that with, I guess, let's call it anybody from the generation of the really old ones. It is pretty fun to watch, actually. If you see somebody that goes to save, and they're from a certain, I guess, era, I've noticed, and I'm pretty sure I've noticed it because I do it, and I've noticed other players do it as well. They save multiple times, even on the same save file. So they go to save, and then they go back in and they save over it again, just in case, because that's how, I guess, like preconditioned we were of like you need to save. And honestly, I have thought about implementing an autosave, but I'm like, and I know the problem is with autosave. Well, to be fair, I mean, just from a personal preference, yeah, kind of, because I'm like, I myself, when I'm playing games that have an autosave, I really don't like it. Like, I really don't like that kind of lack of control, and honestly, sometimes it creates bugs where you're like, yeah, I'll just load up the fight from again, and then you're like, oh, but I didn't really want to load up the fight, I wanted to go back a bit.
You got like one potion and one hit left, and you're just screwed. Or kind of, yeah, and I'm like, or you, the autosave will save sometimes over the save file I want. So anyway, I've mulled over it. I think I'm going to make the decision, and I know that it might turn out some players off, but I'm like, look, I've got to stick with my retro vision of no, you should do like a little Easter egg, like you forgot to save, haha.
Well, actually, yeah, in the opening intro, I think to be fair, I think since the version you played, like I said, you can pretty much save anywhere, but in the dungeons you can't. So initially on the dungeon you had to like step over a save point, but now the message pops up anyways, regardless of whether you step on it. It says, hey, you're in a dungeon, you need to use these save points. So I'm like, all right, that should be enough. Like but yeah, I didn't notice that one for sure, man. And but I guess tying that back in, I did want to say thanks for putting in the time and effort. You definitely did multiple tours of duty there just to get through, and you still got more demo to play if you ever feel it. But
no,
I appreciate you putting in the time.
I still intend to finish it out because I want to make a video of like all 4 hours, just one video.
Nice.
Yeah. No, I truly love this game. Like, I thought this was a blast. I remember when I was playing this, I was having fun, and then you dropped in, and I was like, oh, holy shit! Like the developers here, and then this is where I found out like you're a one-man team. Yeah, like that blows my mind, dude.
I mean, we'll put it this way. I guess by definition, yes, I am a solo developer. There's nobody else, I guess, modifying the code or doing any of that. But with that being said, I mean, even some of the people in the chat right now are very close other fellow indie devs, and we kind of help each other out when necessary. I mean, if I have a coding question, they're really good at helping out and be like, oh yeah, you got to fix that, by changing this line of code, and vice versa. I've tried helping out when they need like art commissions or whatever. I mean, not charging them, but we just kind of, hey, I need a title screen. I'll try and help them out. And we have some guys that are really good at creating music, and just kind of together, it's one of those kind of iron strengthens iron sort of thing. And I actually really recommend that other developers out there do the same. Like find a community that has the same sort of preference and style as you, because if you don't have, that's the other thing too, that even though it is such a niche community, there's niche communities within that, right? So even though I'm like, look, it's a classic retro RPG, but I mean, all of our games are either we've got a Wild West version we've got, but most of them are kind of fantasy, medieval era. And if you were about to ask me like, oh, well, what do you think about this Amori game, or these like psychological teen horror games that are also made with the RPG Maker engine, I won't say that they're bad games, because they could be really high quality, but I have no interest in playing them. And it's one of those things where if I tried to make a community with those people and they were like, yeah, can you help me out with my game? It would be really hard for me to ever even play test it or provide any sort of story evaluation or anything else, just because it wouldn't be my style or preference at all. So I really wouldn't be able to provide proper feedback. But if you find people who are, I guess, like-minded enough that you can kind of, it doesn't need to be exact, but enough so that you actually don't mind playing each other's games, and you don't mind giving that feedback, and you don't mind lending the assists, it goes a long way. Like, I would say ever since we kind of formed up the Sanctuary group, at least, my development speed just kind of hit like a new gear, and I took off. It was one of those things where I didn't have to struggle for weeks on end wondering like, how do I code this action sequence in this battle? Like, I could just ask and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's a simple thing, you just fix this line of code. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Because there is a lot of community resources out there that are available. There is a lot of stuff that the community gives back for free, and there is a lot of places you can go to ask for questions, but it's so much better when you can just ask somebody who's already familiar with your game and already familiar with your story and characters, and say, hey, look, I'm trying to implement X, Y, and Z. Does this fit? How do I do it? And they can just, I recommend everybody out there find a similar community.
No, that is awesome. Real quick, we have some hype in the chat, so let's go ahead and address some of this. Shout out to Heroic Cypher and Rythan J. Sorry if I'm butchering those names. I'm really sorry. But thank you guys for coming back. Sorry that the stream dropped frames. Just too much hype earlier. Too much hype in the chat. You guys were just killing it in the comments, and then OBS is like, ah. So we appreciate you guys coming back. So we have William say, this is the dev talking directly to you. Please save. Heroic saying that I like you can just replay this with different starting characters. I love that so much. Let's put a pin in that real quick. So we have Cypher sprinting monsters. I butchered that one
spriting.
Too. Spriting monsters. Ooh, those are cool. We'll have to check out some of those designs. Pay time off ends after tomorrow. William Black. Find devs who share your philosophy and can help you fill in your weaknesses. I get to watch the stream and talk to people, so that's nice. Welcome to the streams, Cypher. We really appreciate you. JRH, you as well. So yeah, I really like how this game not only lets you pick a different starting path with a different introduction, but you could do that with all the characters too. What was some of the inspiration going into creating this game? Because this game, it feels like combines so many elements of like my favorite RPGs.
There's definitely some heavy influences from all over the place for sure. I guess maybe it did tie into the whole, originally it was a D&D campaign that I kind of come up with. Obviously it's morphed into who knows what by now, but originally that's what it was. And I had various players playing it, and my logic was just basically that for the time stream that the Chronomancer picks you on, you kind of follow the time stream of a chosen hero, and then effectively though, for the most part, the party ends up together and they kind of do their own thing. But I wanted to kind of add a bit of replayability and a bit of more connection with each character. So depending on which character you choose, you'll obviously see a different intro that kind of explains a bit of their backstory. You'll see different dream sequences. If the party ever splits up or goes on a separate path, even temporarily, you'll follow the hero that you went, and you'll see kind of unique content and unique, I guess, experiences, I guess, but that way. Even in the demo alone, I guess this is spoilers, but it's in the demo. Like one of the party members actually leaves for a while and then comes back, and if you choose to be that hero, you kind of see where they go and what they do.
That is really cool. I love that.
There's another hero in there that they kind of sneak off at one point and kind of have a bit of a romantic moment with somebody else. But again, you won't see that if you're not one of the other characters. And while you're off with that one character moment, you won't see the scenes that are happening with the rest of the group because of that. And I was kind of hoping, and also when you choose a different hero, each hero at the beginning of their intro receives a certain relic, which is based on like almost like a percentage stat boost, so that whatever main character you choose, they will feel like the main character because they'll already be outfitted with better equipment and kind of just feel more powerful. And it is kind of nice seeing that pretty much anybody who's played it, usually they walk away being like, hey, I really like this character, but I'm not, maybe they don't dig some of the other characters, but just about anybody who's played usually says that whatever character they pick, they're like, I really like this character. And the reason they do is because I'm like, well, you got to see their backstory, I think the only exception once was, or the only exceptions I've noticed is Johan. He's a bit of a divisive. Anyway, people are divided on him. We'll put it that way. Because he's very much.
Who's your favorite?
I honestly don't have one. It's one of those ones where I really don't. Strange enough, I think from the main 6, I don't know. I really don't. I would honestly say I don't really have a favorite of those. I'd honestly say that, like, I think my favorites are kind of the ones outside of the main 6. So you meet up with a monk character later. I'd say that he's probably one of my favorites, and he joins your team. And then you, honestly, some of the villains I really enjoy. I kind of really enjoy.
I love the boss fight. The way you kind of did the design, like how it felt like Final Fantasy 6 for a little bit, right? Like how it was like the detailed artwork as opposed to like the little the 3D model.
Little character sprites. Yeah, I mean that is a bit of, I guess, theoretically, I suppose that's a bit of art inconsistency, but I just don't have the resources to pay somebody to sprite everything up properly, I guess. But yeah, I mean there is a bunch of those kind of pre-built giant monsters that kind of come with the engine. With that being said, I think I did modify that one a fair bit, because the original version it had like kind of like frilly wristbands, and I think it was coming out of the back of like a dead clown or something. I don't know. It was pretty silly looking. So I did do some custom modifications on that one. But yeah, so I think you were mentioning the influences before. Originally, obviously, you kind of touched base on it. Final Fantasy 6 was a huge one. Like I said, it was based on a D&D campaign, so Dungeons and Dragons is definitely another influence. There's a touch of Warcraft in there as far as the kind of the humans and the orcs and the different kind of tribing races, for lack of a better term. There's some touch of Game of Thrones. There's a lot of, I guess, in the background. You don't really become involved with it too much until later on, but there is a lot of politics and backstabbing and throat slitting. There is a lot of tropes, honestly, which I kind of did intentionally. I thought that we'll put it this way. I have always enjoyed, I guess, game tropes, whether it's, save the princess, or, unlock the magic crystal, or collect the sacred stones, or save the universe. Like, those things are all very cool and very, I guess, psychologically satisfying. But what I did is I tried to add a more realistic, I guess, basically taking those elements and saying, okay, well, if those elements were, let's say you took all those elements and you put them into like a more realistic setting like Game of Thrones, how would people react? So for instance, if there is a prophecy out there that says, hey, look, you gotta, you find the sacred person, they gotta go and restore balance to the universe, other people are going to hear that prophecy. Other people are maybe going to assume it was them. Other generations are going to assume it was them. If there's a time-traveling mage, what does that actually let them do? What are the limitations of that magic? What could or couldn't happen? And then kind of adding like a realistic spin on it. So, for instance, even the way the game starts, the time mage kind of says, "Hey, look, I've seen you 6 at the very, the big important moment. I'm here to recruit you." So, out of whether it's coincidence or influence from her, the 6 end up kind of becoming a team, and over the 4.5 hours, they separate, they come back together, and they each have their own individual motivations as to why they would want to stick together as a team. But then you can always kind of ask yourself, well, would they have ever have done that if it hadn't been for this person kind of guiding them or influencing them? And yeah, like I said, just adding a lot of a more realistic spin on a fairly, I guess, fantastical kind of trope and idea.
Yeah, real quick, we have Zypher saying Jet was their favorite because it was the first one they picked. Gold is Johan. That's his favorite. JRH picked a Jet for the first time. William picked Jet's his favorite too. I picked Raven. I don't know. I was playing. My girlfriend was watching. She's like, "You have to pick Raven." I was like, "Okay, I'm picking Raven." Like,
I mean, it's best not to argue with your girlfriend. You
yeah. And then we have William McBlack. I especially like how much Halsa and her story has improved since your first draft. Most improved character. So when you go through these revisions and everything, what does that look like for you as a solo dev?
Basically, I've had the main, let's call it, skeleton of the story since day one. Like I kind of had my beginning, middle, and end. I had the basic arc of each character. Some of them are relatively static characters. Some of them don't really change, to be honest. It's more the story around them and how they react to it. The characters do go through some up and down changes, whether it's from learning or growing or experiencing trauma or whatever it is. Like, they do kind of go through their ups and downs. But as far as I'd say the most critical part probably was the demo, because theoretically, like, that's really the first impression that you're giving out to everybody.
Yeah.
So it is the most critical. You do really need to kind of do an amazing job of kind of saying, hey, look, this is what the game is like, this is what the gameplay is like, this is who the characters are, here's what the story is, and getting enough of that to really hook somebody. And that really is the hardest challenge. Like, after that, you kind of get at that point, if you've done a really, really good, for lack of a better term, first impression, the player at that point will kind of be like, look, I know the characters, I know the story, and it's a little less stressful, to be honest. But as far as the development process, I mean, I would say if I have I have a certain reason that certain components need to be a certain way. But if somebody like another developer or even a critic or whatever points out some very good reasons why it doesn't make sense, or how it would be better or stronger if I did things differently, I'm definitely open to switching things around and changing them up. Or even from like a battle balance point of view, if they say, hey, look, this character's kit feels boring or broken or whatever, it's best to kind of definitely go in with an open mind, and instead of saying like, well, no, I want it to be the other way, kind of ask like, why, why am I against not doing it? And I mean, obviously my game's gotten a lot better. I recently replayed a version from like 2 years ago, and it was like the differential, it was shocking. Like, it was I guess no, sorry, maybe more than 2 years ago. Maybe it was like 2.5, 3 years ago. It was one of my first, I guess, deployments that I had made, and it was like knock your head back, shocking how far it's come, and which is kind of nice, to be honest. It's kind of nice to know, like, hey, I've come this far, I've learned a lot, everything looks better, it sounds better, it plays better, the balance is better, the characters are better, the stories are like, it is, yeah, like, you can kind of breathe like a big sigh of relief, because I think I'm finally at the point where I'm like, I'm on the right track.
We have the Fluff stopping in. Oh, you're doing this one again? We're actually doing an interview with the developer this time around. So we're not playing this time. Hands up, not playing. But this is the gameplay footage from our stream that we did last. So welcome on in, Fluff. If you have any questions for the dev, feel free to ask away. So what are some of the more challenging aspects of creating an RPG? I know combat, I know story is a big part of it. So how hard is it balancing those two?
It's ridiculously hard. It's it really is, because it's not even just that. You, like I said, it's this really hard balancing act, especially for let's say a JRPG, which is, I guess, how we would refer to this game, where there's kind of a preset story one way or the other. It's not just an open world like a Skyrim or anything like that, where you kind of just choose to kind of go off and do whatever you want. I mean, I know that has a bit of, I guess, preset story, but this one's very much almost like a narrative show or movie that you almost unlock as you play, sort of thing. So you really do have to find this crazy balance between how much story and lore do I need to tell them, how much character development do I need to tell them right now, how much introduction do I need, but I have to make sure that the player doesn't get bored. So how can I fit in a proper balance of exploration or combat, and how much of that, again, do I expose them to early on? I don't want to have the player start the game and have a skill list of 50 different moves, which they're never going to even have a chance to explore. But on the other hand, if I only give them like one move, they're going to be like, what is this, a game for babies? And they'll turn it off immediately. And unfortunately, in addition to all of this weird balancing act that you need to do, from, like I said, how much can I give them, how much, how like I said, I think pacing is one of the biggest obstacles to overcome, especially at the beginning. But then, in addition to that, unfortunately, and I'm sure it's like I know you do indie comics, it's probably the same way, where I think we're held to a much higher standard than AAA companies. And then by that logic, I don't necessarily mean like our games have to, or games or comics have to be as good looking or as top quality, but the fundamentals, I believe, are, like I said, the average person will be much more unforgiving if we don't follow those fundamentals. So for instance, like Final Fantasy, 9, a good 2 hours of that game, you're just kind of wandering around the first town, trying to find people and trying to get the game going and exploring. Like, if I tried that exact same philosophy with my game, they would just turn it off. They would be like, "What is this? I'm bored. This guy is boring me," because they don't. And I think the reason why is with an indie developer, you don't have the luxury of either a built-up fan base, and you also don't have the luxury of almost that, like, they expect you know what you're doing.
Yeah, like, the room for error seems like it's a lot. There's none, essentially.
Yeah, they're correct. It's one of those things where a lot of times, even if you try to be a bit clever with your storytelling, and especially at the beginning, and if you try to, like, let's say, hide details or add subtleties, because nobody knows who you are, or that where you're from, they will actually chalk that up to, let's say, bad storytelling or bad game design or bad whatever, rather than, because from their point of view, they're just playing the odds. They're like, I don't know this person. They're an indie solo dev. They just assume that it's bad quality rather than high level stuff, right? So that is another thing where you have to really, it's hard, man. It's really hard. But anyway, like I said, I think once you get the initial demo down, if you can get a good demo, like an hour's worth of, like, an hour plus of, like, good story, good pacing, and everything else, I think most players kind of walk away at the end of that kind of being like, all right, cool, like, I know what you're about, this looks good, everything seemed good, and I think you get, like, a bit of a I guess a turnover or a bit of, like, a following at that point. But yeah, it like I said, you almost have to, like, walk on eggshells. And I don't think it's just necessarily with RPGs. I think it'll be with anything indie related, whether it's indie movies or comics or anything like that.
Well, what really sucks too is, like, for the mainstream, they have that label, they have that, they have that image, and that helps sell it in itself, right? Like, you guys have to start from the bottom and build that image yourself without any sort of, like, marketing brand behind you. And that, like, you guys are balancing and wearing so many different hats to get this out there and create it. It's remarkable when you sit down and think about it.
Yeah, agreed. And it is one of those things where I think that's one of the reasons I think people, when they're being critical of, let's say, AAA versus indie, like, keep in mind the huge budget and manpower behind each of them, right? Like, it's one of the reasons I feel people, like, when they're talking about, like, I don't know, the Marvel Universe, and people are like, well, people are overly critical of it. I'm like, well, the reason they're overly critical of it is money and labor are no longer a problem.
Yeah.
Like, they can afford to spend millions on, tightening the special effects. They can hire as many extras as they need. They can put in the manpower for costume and design and story writing and edits. And strangely enough, a lot of times AAA it seems like the easiest one they cut back on is writing, which is mind-boggling to me, because I'm like, just pay your writers more. You can make some. Anyway, but it does seem crazy that they kind of skimp on that one out of all the things. But yeah, with indie though, you're right. You have to. I mean, I have to be in charge of, I guess, again, doing the pacing and the feedback. I have to be in charge of, I guess, customer service and feedback of others. I have to be in charge of art, direction, music, game balancing, combat, action sequencing, exploration, like all of these things that theoretically would have entire units of multiple people handling. But then you're like, no, I gotta do it on my own. So yeah, no, for the indie devs out there, like I said, it is one of those things where, I mean, unfortunately, I maybe am a bit too critical when I see people kind of just shoveling their projects along. We kind of call it shovelware when people put in no amount of effort into their game.
Okay.
But to be fair, even realistically speaking, even the no effort games still take huge amounts of time and effort to make. Unfortunately, though, if it creates a bad impression, then we're like, hey, get out of here, because then people are going to assume my game is like that. And I'm like, I don't want to be associated with that. Up your game. Real quick, I would have said that to me 3 years ago.
We have Zypher. The average gamer isn't going to care if it's an indie game or not. With the amounts of games out there to play, you have to work very hard to make the game stand out. We have William McBlack. Yeah, and especially with RPG Maker, so many people use the same assets. You have to ask, how do I use these same assets but make my game look different and stand out? So I think that's another great segue. What are some of the things you could do to really, utilize these assets and make your game, like, stand out and look different from other games?
Well, and again, I think like any other art, I mean, there's only so many different types of. I mean, again, you're kind of thinking with comics, so I'm kind of trying to tie it into your audience, but there's only so many ways you can have like a manga or an anime style comic, right? Like, but the difference I think is in the subtle details. I guess the difference then would be you'd have an individual artist, and that artist would have their own style. But to be fair, I think it's even similar with even this. Like, even if you're saying, well, here's the same pieces that you're using. Like a lot of those tiles, even on the screen right now for the gameplay, most of those are available. I did actually some of the slight edits on them, but for the most part, they're just, you know, they come with the engine. They're pretty regular and easy to find. I'm actually looking here. I guess I did a fair bit of the editing on those mountains for the angles, but the difference is that you take those pieces and it's how you lay those pieces out that kind of determines your art style. And again, art style is only part of it. I mean, I've heard huge compliments for my music selection, but again, I didn't compose any of the music. It's just more a case of me just finding the right song from the right, you know, free source that I can use and putting it in appropriately, and changing the sound effects or the animations to kind of make them, again, they're relatively common, but the idea is that you kind of change it and modify it to make it match your style. I do a lot of lighting and shadow modifications as well, like even around that waterfall. It's out of screen now, but there was a little waterfall off to the right, but I kind of added like almost like a mist bloom around it, and even that's again like a little custom edition. It doesn't look like it's that big of a deal, but again, it kind of gives it that unique style.
It's those small flares that set it apart, though.
Yeah, kind of, because I mean, there's, like I said, every it is one of those things where every little change or every little kind of unique thing you add, if it's only just one or two things, it may not seem like it's much, but it adds up. Like everyone you add gives it almost a bit of a unique character, and yeah, I think that's the thing too. I guess everybody, it's just like any other, I guess, arcs. Like a lot of the artwork, like the title screen and stuff. Like I actually went and drew those myself. But
really,
yeah, my art school finally came into finally paid up.
It looks good. It looks good.
Oh,
holy crap! A man of many talents. Holy crap!
Well, I think that was one of the reasons I was like, hey, I can maybe pull this off. Because I was like, I went to art school for a few years there.
Did you draw like the character art templates as well, like their profile?
Not the profile faces while they're talking here. No, those were generated in the engine. But the when you're kind of at the crossroads and you choose your character from the crossroads time, they have the full body busts. Those ones I did.
Look at you, man.
So, yeah, yeah. Like I said, I gotta find a way to put it to use, I suppose. So yeah. So I mean, and that was one of those things too, where I guess this is maybe good advice for anybody out there who's making their own game. Like you said, you have to wear a lot of hats, and I think like Jeff was mentioning earlier, like get in touch with people who compliment you, like not necessarily like they give you compliments, but like their skills, they fill in the skill areas where you're weak in, because you're not going to be great in all of them, and it's good to have somebody, like right now with Shay standing there, like I drew that one for instance. But so for instance, I mean I knew artistically I'm pretty decent, but I mean, again, I have no ability to compose music, so if I needed music help, I mean I kind of know like, hey, this sounds good or this doesn't sound good, but I have no ability to be like, I'll just write up my own song.
Notes.
Yeah, I think I don't know how long I spent trying to make my own jump sound effect with like a sound modulator. That was ridiculous. And even the font, when I originally had the font, there was too many characters that people were like, hey, I can't read this font, you need to change it. So I went into like a font editor and like learned how to edit fonts. That I don't know, it's just so many little things, like you said, but it adds up. But anyway, yeah, find people that kind of compliment, you know, you, and kind of, and then you in turn, you know, help them, and together you should be able to come up with something pretty decent at the end, I hope. But
real quick, we have RC done. It's a testament of how well Guld has done with the fundamentals, that he uses pre-made RPG Maker assets and people still love it. We have William McBlack. Guld's artistic background makes his game so much prettier. Cypher, making music is one thing I cannot do. And then William saying I just write things. Yeah, making music's its whole there's like so much that goes into this, that when you are, you know, essentially just a one-man team, like how do you not get overwhelmed with it?
It is. 1 second. It is overwhelming, and I'm actually really surprised that I've stuck with this nearly as long as I have. Historically, like I said, I knew I had some art skills, but what would happen historically is that I would get into a project, go really hard, really fast for like 2 weeks, and then put it on the back burner and never look at it again for like 2 years. So the fact that I've actually kind of been able to do this is kind of, nuts and very out of character, to be honest. Because I think that was just characteristically how I always was, and I think one of the reasons why is there's so much to do that it kind of almost lends itself to it, I guess. So for instance, let's say I'm sitting here making maps all day, which actually, to be fair, I almost find that therapeutic at this point. But let's say I was doing it all day and I was getting really bored and I was like, look, I'm kind of done with maps. I can just go and play test my game. I can then go and say, like, look, I need to up the combat, I need to change the speed, and then I can do, let's call action sequencing, which is the during the fight, like the jumping forward and the slashing and the spell casting and stuff, kind of modifying those around because there's always more skills to add. I can add new stuff in the database as far as new weapons and armor. I can kind of break down the math of all of that. I can do battle testing to make sure everything's balanced, and they'll say if I get bored of that, well, I've got custom art I could always fill in for various scenes, so I could actually get the tablet out and start drawing. If I get bored of that, there's all these other little, like, I can do cutscenes, which, by the way, cutscenes are still one of my weakest points. I think I'm getting okay at them, but I think the only reason I'm okay at them is because I put so much effort into them, because I know I'm not good.
It's almost like you gotta brute force your way to do it, right? Like you're like, this is happening one way or another.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things where I knew it was one of my weaknesses, so I think I put in like an extra concentrated effort of like, no, I need the fade out to be more. Nah, this music doesn't pick up right. No, this character needs to turn at this pace, this time, and I do like, I guess I'm overly critical of myself, so it does take so long on it. By the way, that's still my least favorite part is doing cutscenes. But
well, hey, I mean, the cutscenes are really pivotal to an RPG, JRPG as well, right? Like, you need those just as much as the combat and the story.
Oh yeah, you need everything. It's and it is one thing where I'd say every day I try to get something done, and even if it's not a lot, I guess my logic is just like, well, that's one less thing I need to do tomorrow. Like, you kind of have to just view it as like a daily step. You'd be like, okay, today's step is this, and some days you get a ton done, other days you don't. It's just, just try and get something done, something just a little bit every day, because especially for the scale of this game, I'm like, if I try to stop and think about like, well, how long, how much more do I need to do, the thought would just be overwhelming. Like, I honestly figured I'd have this done by I figured I would have had it done before this year, and obviously I didn't, because this year started, and now this year's almost done, and then now I'm like, I have like a rough estimate by next year. So I think mentally, just to make myself feel better, I've said, hey, look, I'll have it done before George R. R. Martin finishes his next A Song of Ice and Fire. That should be if I can beat him on that, I'll feel good.
Yeah. So speaking of that, though, I mean, where are you looking at having this game available for anyone watching? If you haven't checked out this demo, which I'm sure 95% of the people watching have, right here is the link to download Chapter 1 for free. You get 4 hours of gameplay for free, and it is a blast. So when are where all can people find this game once it's completed and available for purchase?
Yeah, I mean, I might still keep the itch location for the final version. I'm definitely going to be porting it to Steam. As far as I know, it'll be available for PC for sure. I'll look into getting a Mac and an iOS version, but I'm not, since I have no proper way of testing those, especially the iOS. I'm really skeptical whether that's going to work, but I don't really have a Mac, so I won't really be able to test that, so I don't know for sure if that'll work. I've looked into console releases, specifically Switch, but I've heard that there's a lot of issues transitioning the engine from one to the other, so unfortunately it might be a PC only, just based on the logistics of it. But priority one right now is just finish the game, period. And then get it out there on PC, and then I think if that all goes as well, I'm sure that won't go smoothly just based on Murphy's Law, but even after that goes through, then like I said, I'll definitely put it on Steam for sure. But then at that point, I've had numerous requests for other language translations. I've had requests for other platforms, and I just was like on your page today, and someone was like, "Hey, I'm from Italy. I love this game. I do like localization for you for Italian." And I was like, "Dude, holy crap! People around the world are loving this." I mean, or people who are into localization are just trying to find any project for work, I suppose. But one of the two.
I didn't realize that was them asking for money. I thought that was them just like loving it, like, let me do this for you.
I don't know the details. I mean, they've kind of reached out. Like I said, it's one of those things where I'm like, I'll find the proper details out one of these days. But and then, like I said, I've had a fair bit of requests for visually impaired improvements. And it's one of those things where you want to make your game as accessible as possible to everybody, whether it's visual impaired or it was one of the reasons why I made sure that one of the fights you have to do, you had to use almost the timed inputs for the thief to steal something. But then people were like, well, look, some of us, the reason we play turn-based RPGs is because we can't play the kind of the fast stitch because we have mobility issues as far as like hand coordination and everything else. So I had to like readjust that boss and change it so that you would still be able to win it, even if you weren't able to use the QuickTime inputs or whatever. So, yeah, I guess, like I said, it's one of those things where initially you're like, well, I want this thing to be tough and I want this and that. But you're like, but is there any reason I need to do, exclude a certain group if it's not going to cause any harm elsewhere, or if I can balance it properly? So, yeah, like I said, it's a lot of things to consider, but I'm kind of putting a lot of that on the back burner for right now because I'm like, well, step number one is get this thing done. Like, even if I just get like the bare bones straight path of like, look, this is the minimum of what needs to be done, and then I can worry about like adding extra side quests or towns throughout the game or whatever, or adding like little side content. But primarily, I'm like, look, let's just see if we can get the meat and potatoes done first, and then. So, but yeah, no. As far as distribution, like I said, I'll look into other platforms, but as far as I know, as of right now, it'll be probably on itch, definitely on Steam, and I'll look at other platforms and other availability after that.
So what's next for you, though? Let's say retirement.
To be honest, like I said, it's going to be at least another year. So the idea of having something after this is kind of like nonsensical. I'm like, I'll be lucky if I live that long. But it's I don't know. I think number one, once I finally get this thing done, next will be catching up on all of the games that I've wanted to play, with specifically the other indie games. Like there's so many other indie games where I'm like, oh, that looks good. Hey, I want to try that out. And I try to help out, especially with the close group I'm with, play their games as much as I can. But time, I'm fully aware of the irony of making a game about time travel and not having enough of my own time. But yeah, free time is like by far and away the most rare commodity for me right now. And,
it is.
Yeah, it's if this is my full-time job, if I could get this to be my full-time job and I could quit my other full-time job, yeah, things would open up pretty quick.
God, that's the dream, isn't it? Like every day I'm like looking, I'm like, okay, well, I got about 5.5 hours of sleep. I have to go to bed. Wake up, rinse and repeat, do the same thing over and over. I'm still trying to figure out the formula to add like 2 extra hours. If I could get to like a 26-hour day, I feel like it would be game changing.
Maybe, or you would probably just burn those 2 hours, or you could use them for sleep. Who knows? Maybe if you got them for sleep, you'd be more. And yeah, man, I've noticed your schedule. You definitely put in the time, and I don't know. Obviously, every once in a while, you do need to kind of rest and recoup for sure. So, yeah. But honestly, if as far as other projects, in my mind, I've always kind of been intrigued. Like, I would maybe like to make like either a beat 'em up. We've been talking recently, especially with the local group there, how much we enjoyed the side-scroller beat-em-ups, specifically the old Capcom ones. And then we were talking about the crossover between RPGs and beat-em-ups and how some of the games, whether it was like River City Ransom or Dungeons and Dragons, had a couple side-scrolling beat-em-ups, or Knights of the Round. Like they had the RPG elements in them, but they were still side-scrolling beat-em-ups, and how much fun they were. And I was like, that would be kind of cool to make. Although I'd have to learn a new engine.
That'd be pretty unique. We have Fluff. I think you addressed this before I came in. Do you have any plans for a sequel or projects after this? I know we talked about the project, but do you think there ever could be like a sequel or a part 2 to this?
I think if I did, I would probably make it so it would be very unrelated to this story. Maybe the same world or the same type of world. Because I came up with a whole history for this sort of thing. So I could do an early prequel, kind of talking about one of the earlier wars from back in the day, or maybe like a much further off sequel where at most one of these characters would maybe make a cameo. But I'd kind of refrain from reusing a lot of the same characters. I don't know why, but I find a lot of times when people do that in stories, it almost like taints or changes the original. Like you kind of like maybe because a lot of times from a writing point of view, you want to make way for the new, right? So then a lot of times you kind of force the old out, and potentially in a really not good way, which kind of just leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth, because it's not even necessarily the new story that you're doing. Then you're kind of almost like touching too much on the old one. But When I'm working on a non-sequel in the same world because it's yeah, like I said, same world maybe. And I mean, maybe I would do like a slight change to the battle system or something, like make it still its own unique game entirely, but not maybe some certain elements as far as kingdoms or world, but try to avoid too many of the direct crossover. If I did another sequel, I think honestly though, after this is done, I'd kind of be done with my my fantasy RPG for quite some time. I'm not to say that I never would do it again, but I think I'd be done for a while. But I've been kind of really into the cyberpunk scene, not so much the game itself, like Cyberpunk or whatever, but
the anime.
Like honestly, I've been rewatching Ghost in the Shell standalone complex.
Ooh, yeah.
Honestly, that standalone complex, some of the best writing and characters I like, and the world building. It's so good. Like, what else? And same thing. I'm a huge original Blade Runner fan. So I think maybe even like either a post-apocalypse or a future dystopia or like a sci-fi setting that I might do. Because I do have a lot of interest into all of that. So I'm like, maybe that would be the next kind of venture, and it would be different enough that I think I'd have enough kind of motivation to keep it going. But I think after it'd probably go 5 years or more when I'm done this one, I'm like, I think I'll be taking a pretty healthy break from RPG or fantasy RPGs for a bit. But I never want to say never.
We have Zypher. I'm working on a non-sequel in the same world because it's alienating, and then William McBlack Guld be like, I'm out. So, Guld, thank you for coming on here and breaking down this awesome indie game. Once again, everyone that is watching, here is the link to download the first chapter for free. This has been such an awesome talk, man. I appreciate it. This is interview with the indie game developer number 2. So anyone out there, if you have an indie game you want to come on, feel free to hit me up. I'd love to get you on. Even if you don't want to be interviewed, I'd love to play your games. I love playing indie games. I'm trying to get in a more consistent stream schedule. That's actually part of the reason why I'm trying to eliminate some of my days where so I'm not doing them daily, so I could have some time to stream some of these games and have time to play them myself. Because dude, these games are fun, and I am a big fan of the last Chronomancer. This was such a fun game to play, and Guld, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come break it down for us.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap things up, though, I always love ending these podcasts on a strong note, and that is with a little piece of advice. So for anyone out there who is thinking about getting into creating indie games themselves, or maybe they are starting it, but they're having trouble getting motivated to keep going, what type of advice would you offer them to help them just get started?
My strong advice would be, if you pick a project that you love. If you genuinely have a story to tell, or a game you genuinely have a lot of passion for, you'll need that, because otherwise you likely won't see it to completion. So pick something that you genuinely, you yourself would want to play, that you yourself have passion towards, because day in, day out, for the time it takes to create it, it'll probably drain it out of you. If you're doing it just to make a profit, don't do what I'm doing. It's by far and away not the way to make money. If you're doing it for profit and you just want to make a game and make some money out of it, do something really, really quick that showcases all of your skills, set it up as a demo, use it for your portfolio, and get a job as a full-time game developer with an established company. But like I said, if you genuinely want full creative control over a passion project that you want to do, and you're willing to kind of, take some advice along the way and change it a little bit here and there, then yeah, my advice is, that's it. Stick to your vision. Stick to the game you want to make because you love it. Because if you don't have that love for it, you probably won't make it. I know that may sound discouraging, but it's putting your love in the right spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is some outstanding advice. We have everyone in the chat. RC Dunn, great interview, guys. Heroic Cypher, amazing game. Guld. Everyone, thank you so much for being in the chat. Sorry about our mishap earlier with dropping frames, but we were able to finish the interview to completion. And you know what? I think OBS was right. The interview was too hyped. We had to nerf it down a little bit. So everyone watching, be sure to check out Guld. Guld, where can everyone find you at? What social media platforms are you on?
I think I've got an account pretty much on most of them, but by far and away the most frequent would be on Twitter at Guld, GULD _TLC. I had no idea my game abbreviated to TLC until I thought about it afterwards.
That's perfect though.
I mean, you don't even chase any waterfalls, so I don't know. I guess it suits it. I guess there is no scrubs either, so yeah, it works out pretty good. But so that's probably the most likely is Twitter at Guld _ TLC, and then again the itch link which you posted is the best place to find any updates for my game. But it's been pretty updateless for a while because, like I said, there's the free demo out there, but mostly it's day in day out. I'll be working at the big project.
No, absolutely. And real quick before we end, the Fluff wants to know if you're okay with them recording their playthrough. So is that something that's cool for you for people to do? Is record their playthrough and post it?
Oh yeah, by all means. It's one of the. I think somebody asked like, hey, they were noticing how many Twitter followers I had, and they said, oh yeah, how does it feel to have this many followers? And I said, honestly, the second I broke one person outside of my friends and family that played it, I considered this game a huge success. Because like I said, I honestly was making it just for me, for my friends and family. I had no idea that anybody anywhere would be interested at all. And it's one of the I guess very heartwarming feeling to just type in the name of my game into YouTube or Twitch and just find out that some random person has played it and that they love it. And from people all over the world, I've had interviews with people from like Germany and Czech Republic and I guess Czechia, I guess now, like people in England that just adore my game. Like it is very humbling, and I am very appreciative of all of it because, like I said, it's far exceeded any expectation I ever had. And even if I give up tomorrow and just walk away from it all, I will still consider this experience a huge plus. So, yeah, by all means, if anybody out there wants to play it, please go ahead and by all means, I hope it doesn't disappoint.
No, absolutely, and I love it. Yeah, it has my vouch for it. I think you guys will love it just as much. Everyone watching, I hope you all have an awesome Thursday. Like I said, if you have indie games, if you want to come on the show, hit me up, please. Feel free. I would love to play your game. That being said, we are going to be logging off. Everyone have an awesome day, but most importantly, keep it geekly.